Okay, everybody, welcome to Nerdy Book Club. I am your host. So Bad Weekend was my pick. Admittedly, I picked it because I just read the synopsis. I Googled what were the best graphic novels of 2019, and then I read all of the little synopses, and then this one, because of the situation that we're currently in, and it was supposed to be like the summer of conventions this year, this one stuck out to me the most. So it's by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, with colors by Jacob Phillips, who is Sean Phillips' son, which is super cool. So I guess what we usually do is we start out with our scores. So I will go first. I give this an 8 out of 10. And I will pick Lisa and Mike to go next.
Okay. I'm going to give it a 9 because I thought it was great to have a book that actually had a beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
I will also give it a 9. I love the artwork. I love how it was so focused and condensed and told a story that the characters, it was just great. I loved it. 9 out of 10. And I will pick Pat.
I will give it an 8. It was a short, delicious, juicy bit of story. And it was very amusing to see Ed Brubaker sort of do like that noir thing he does, but sort of in this very geeky convention context. Oliver and Friend, please proceed.
Hello, yes. So I think for me it was an 8. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I strongly agree with Lisa. It's nice reading a book that has an actual finite ending and doesn't just run until the company decides it's not profitable anymore. I think it was really good. I really liked the characters and kind of the interesting aspects they had on it. I don't know if it kind of delved into subject matter quite as deeply as it could have, but maybe it doesn't need to. I don't know. So I thought it was really good. Yeah.
I'll give it 7. I really liked it, except the twist ending, where I was like, it bothered me afterwards. It was just a little too pat.
Fair.
But yeah, other than that, I'm reading it, it was I got through it pretty quickly. I mean, not just because it was short, but also because I was I just wanted to keep reading. But yeah. I don't know.
Juniper.
I really don't know what to give it. I'm grumpy and ornery, and I don't want to give it my normal 2 just because. So I'm not going to give it a number, but it was good. Lucy?
Hey, Juniper. So I didn't read it, but it is so short that I might read it during the meeting. Because I just was I just found a scan of it online. I'm this is less than 70 pages. I have no good excuse. I did try to read other Ed Brubaker things and couldn't get into it, though, so that was part of the reason why I was dragging my feet for this. So I'm just interested to hear what other people have to say. It sounds like it was pretty well received so far. So I'm just going to gauge other people's responses and kind of flip through it while you guys talk. Who's left?
Alex still has to go, and so does Jeff, I think.
Yeah, let's do Alex.
All right, thanks, Lucy. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Great story, depressing but great, and I really love the artwork and the colors especially. So let's go to Jeff.
I feel I'm kind of like everyone else, giving it around an 8, though I'm going to say a 7, because I think there's things about it that are fantastic, and the art, I'm looking forward to talking about the art, because I thought the art was fantastic. I thought the story was really good, but it was slight, right? I think Oliver said it didn't delve into things, and that's fine. It was like a good 72-page story, but that also, I think, limited it to some degree. It was like a nice novella. So yeah, 7.
Gal?
And Michael?
I give it. I think I give it overall an 8, but because of the subject matter, I give it a 9. Just because, like, obviously, I love this whole world, and I think there were a lot of these were based on real people, and some of the names they dropped were real people. So it was really weird to see this like noir crime fiction thing, but all about comic book artists, which I've never seen before. And I think this would be maybe not a good movie, but maybe a good hour-long episode of like a anthology show or something. So overall, I really, really, really like this. And I actually did really like the ending. We can talk about that later. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. And Ed Brubaker, I've read a lot of his other stuff, and it's usually this good. Yeah.
Okay, great. I think that's everybody. So what we usually do, I guess, like I created like a little notes with synopsis, but like just in case anyone didn't know, the 2 main characters are a character named Jacob. I don't think that his last name is stated. I could be wrong.
Not sure.
No? Okay, and then his, I guess, old mentor, Hal Crane, who is a notable comic artist from the 70s with a sordid past. So I guess we could talk about the characters. It always takes us longer to talk about the story and the characters, so maybe we could talk about the art since everyone really loved it. Does anyone want to go ahead with something that they really thought stood out? Anybody?
About the art?
Yeah.
Yeah. And no, anybody can go ahead. I think like Jeff specifically said he really liked the art, and so did Mike and Lisa, that I remember.
I like to tell who all the characters were, because I've read some and I can't tell who anybody really is, but I could always tell. And I liked the mood of it. And in particular, my favorite part, when Mike always asks me, what do you think of the art? And then I have to go look at it because I don't really notice. And which I should know by now. But the characters in the background and all their clothing, and I just thought that was spectacular. Their hats, their backpacks, their whatever. I mean, I just think he did a great job with that.
I think I just want to say I used to really like Sean Phillips, but to be honest, I don't really like him I don't really like this style anymore. I think the atmosphere is perfect, the mood is perfect, but I think all these guys are sort of trying to be David Mazzucchelli from Batman Year One, which is fine. But I think Mazzucchelli is a much better artist, and this is one of those artists where for most of the pages the art is fine, but then once in a while there'll be a panel where he goes outside of his comfort zone, and there's one shot. I'll try to find it as we're talking, but it's a close up of his face, and it is so bad, and like the anatomy of his mouth is so bad. It just makes me wonder. Like, is he just copying photographs, or what is he doing for the other pages? But I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe it's just that one panel that's bad just by some fluke, but I don't think I liked it as much as everybody else, but I do agree that the atmosphere fits the story.
Is it Digital 22 when he's talking?
I just found it. Digital 26, the bottom right. If you look at his mouth, it just looks like he had reference for everything except the jaw, and he just went, screw it, I'll just fill in this line here. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what it looks like to me.
I think your Digital 26 is different from my Digital 26. Is it the panel where he's in there with the convention, like one of the workers, one of the people
I'm trying to see if I can share. It's right after he does the interview. He's talking to the guy who's giving him he's got the
yes, you don't just walk up and shove a tape recorder in a man's face.
Right, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the one. I mean, granted, it's only one shot, but it just made me think, like, how could that be so bad? But
oh, sorry, it's Hoopla page 30.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it was like 26 is like way back. But yeah, no, I totally get it. It's like the rules about manga that Scott McCloud talked about, like when something that close up, happens in a panel, it should almost include way more detail than this, and it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's, Mike, again, I find myself wondering, like, it does strike me as someone who draws from a model. Like, as I thought about this as I was reading it, at times I was like, this feels at times like there are those artists who set up models and very much, I mean, I think Alex Ross does this,
Right.
where he sets really elaborate, like every shot he sets up a model so that he has something to guide him. And I can totally imagine this, but I'm going to go in the opposite direction and point to where because that when people do that, it feels in my mind like things get really static.
Right.
And so I think there are places in here where on the whole it feels static, and I feel like the page design isn't super exciting. So when I first looked at it, I didn't love it, but there's something that he's doing with the inking, and we've had, like, I've made a very similar comment probably like 10 times in book club, because one of my favorite things in comic book art is when you can see the brush strokes. So like you see this in Craig Thompson, in Blankets or Habibi. You see it with like Nate Powell in March. But there's this tradition, and I think it's cool that he's doing it. And let me point to a page where this really stuck out to me, like a panel, and there's a lot of them. Digital page 20, the bottom right, which would be maybe for Jolie 24.
Okay.
The bottom right panel, it's just him smoking, and he says, "Jesus Christ, insult to fucking injury." And you look in there, and like the blacks are the ink marks are so like painterly and energetic. Like you can in his cheek, you can see the brushstroke, right? And if you go back to, and this is why this is interesting to me, because if you go back to people like Milton Kniff, that is like what you get. Like you get these like really, really bold brush strokes. You can really see the way the artist is using the brush. You see this in I'm trying to think about Hugo Pratt, like Hugo Pratt, Corto Maltese, and when people do that, like it's making the brush and the artist really, really prominent on the page, and I love it. So that, to me, that the energy of that inking is stronger than the sort of staticness of the modeling of the characters. So I love that.
Yeah, like he really reserves like tiny thin lines for details like shape, but I like that he suggests shade or value using those kinds of strokes. Like the panel that you suggested, there's even though it is the shade is just completely black, it suggests a value when you see the line that's been dragged and it's not totally complete. This is just like a gesture.
Dry brush.
Yeah, and it's super beautiful, and I really like it. And for me, my problem with the stroke like that is it's not reserved. It doesn't seem to be reserved for anything in particular, other than to create a value scale in his black and white art, because he uses the same sort of technique of that stroke in the clothing, like the clothing that they wear, and then even like just things like curtains. So I love it, but it's like it's not as sophisticated as it could be.
That's a good point. I also want to add in the image that you mentioned, Jeff, the same one. I also love the colors in the background are great, and that's by Jacob Phillips. But I love that, the fact that I'm assuming that's a brush, but you can just see that's clearly just like, that's great. Yeah, again, like I think this art works better in wide shot. Like the top of this page where you can see the cosplayers. Like when you just look at that, it's like a impression of what you would see there, and that's when it's at its best, I think. But maybe when you get up into close up, it's not as effective. Maybe that's the issue I have.
If you go from that panel, that doesn't do any. Yeah, if you go from that panel like 4 panels further to this one.
Okay.
Like to me, that's an example of where the figure drawing, where it does feel like he's drawing this from a photograph, or transferring it, doing some sort of, because that he's doing something that really bothers me, and you see it sometimes when people are using a model. If you look at that panel, he's saying "oh I," but his mouth is shut.
Okay.
And,
Yep.
And it makes it. It's like a very mimetic, like, capturing of a figure, but it doesn't have the feeling of speaking because that mouth is shut, and it really bothers me. Like that to me feels really static.
And I just want to add to that, that it brings up another issue I have, is that because this type of art does that so often, you have all these blank faces, but if you were to have speaking mouths, you would have specific expressions instead of just blank, a guy sitting there. And then there's a dialogue on top of that. It's like the art is not really complementing the story as much as it could if they were giving specific facial expressions.
Start going through the panels and see how often the characters have their mouths closed while they're talking.
Right.
And it's sort of a pet peeve for me, because it I don't know whether you guys are bothered by that as much as I am.
I am now, which is terrifying. Never.
Oh, by the way, we could also share. Can you guys see my screen now?
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you guys can all do that. So we could give, if you want to go show a specific panel. I mean, I don't know, it's just an idea, but yeah.
Well, I did want to mention, there's a shot that I like where it's like he's giving a sly look. And it's like, they did a really good job with that. So good that they reused it 2 other times.
Oh, yeah. Where was that?
I mean, it's like
You're going to do it the old-fashioned way, Keith.
Old school.
Yeah, like that face.
Okay.
And then he reuses it like there.
Oh, what page is that?
I don't have numbers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the book does not have any page numbers on it in it.
Okay.
And then he also uses it. And it's like the same, like, quarter down, 3/4 down. He's even pacing, like, the same right to left direction.
Right.
Like,
Can I just?
It's on page 34.
and I would say I liked it the first time I saw it, and I was like, he keeps reusing this.
Right.
Can I just make a very small digression and just say that I am like, it is quickly becoming like one of the big frustrations of mine with a lot of these books is that they just don't have page numbers. And
Yeah.
they could. There's so much just empty space at the bottom of the page, but anyway.
Well, I thought that the artist's use of black ink was really good in creating a tone and a mood, especially for, a noirish kind of story like this. He must have had a special on black ink. I don't know what else to say. A lot of-
Do we know if is this traditional or is it digital?
I don't know, but judging by what artists have told us, I'm going to assume it's all digital.
Yeah.
I think the coloring looks digital, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Honestly, I think it's pretty rare for artists, unfortunately, to do traditional anymore. I don't know, though.
I don't think it's that rare, but
No?
no.
Maybe, okay. Well, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I know that David Finch I don't think he does paper anymore. But that's just one guy.
Like, I think some of them do for others, and they kind of pick the projects that they want to do traditional pen on paper for. Like Jason was saying the same thing, and so it was unique. Like, I think Wonder Woman is going to be almost exclusively like digital, like the third volume. So
I think the inking looks very traditional. Like if it's digital, I'm very fooled.
Which is
I
good,
feel
right?
betrayed if it was all digital. It's about an old school artist and inker taking place in the 90s.
yeah.
The dry brushing looks very. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some filter for that, but man, it looks like traditional ink.
Are we gonna jump to the story, or are we gonna keep talking about
Yeah, I mean, unless anyone else has any points to bring up that we haven't already touched upon about the art.
I thought it did a good job. It's like I've been to San Diego. It's like this does look like a lot like San Diego. Like there's not a whole lot of shots in the city. And I was like, this must. I think he's talking about the Comic-Con in San Diego because.
You know what? The thing I found was really weird, though, Keith, is that it's supposed to be in 1997.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I didn't ever go to like the bigger cons in 1997 or like any conventions in 1997. I know Michael's did. Some other people may have, but I did not. Does anyone know, like, if this is a fair representation of what a convention looked like in 1997? Because I don't feel like it would have been.
I don't think it would have been that big. Like, I don't think there would have been. There may have been like people in costumes there, but like the lingo of what a cosplayer, I feel like would not have existed.
No, it wouldn't have. I didn't even hear that term until Jolie told me in like 2009, right? Or 8 or something.
Okay.
And maybe like as a transition to talking about the story, like the kinds of things that old artists is very testy about, I feel like didn't exist in 1997.
So I started going to San Diego Comic-Con in, I guess, 2001 or 2002. So not long after this is supposed to be set. And I think the first year I went, I drove out with a friend and drove out on Wednesday and bought tickets. And the next year was the first year that it sold out ahead of time.
Whoa.
And then like each year after that, it got more and more. It was like selling out months in advance. But 100%, it was huge, and already all the costuming and everything was there at the beginning of the 2000s. And I think in some ways, I mean, it's sort of interesting that it's posed right there, because that was like the comic makes very clear that this is sort of right at the tail end of the boom, the comic book boom. And this is right when it seemed like this is when comic book shops were closing up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of an interesting moment in comic book history, right? In the late 90s.
Jolie, can we let Sean in? He's saying he can't get in.
Oh, that's Michael's job.
Oh, or whoever's job.
Mike,
okay, how do I do that?
It should be saying that Sean is requesting to be part of the conversation. Oh, sorry, I didn't see your message, Patrick.
Oh, here we go. Admit.
Yeah.
No, because it was in the chat. I didn't have the chat open. Okay, cool.
Hello.
Hello.
John.
Oh, okay. Since you're new, you have to give your rating of the book out of 10, and then maybe just really briefly talk about something that you enjoyed or didn't like or whatever. Sean.
Hello. I'm not showing.
We can hear you though.
Hello.
Oh, there you are.
Hi.
Hi.
I kicked him out. He's outside.
I was gonna say, is he in the garage?
He's outside.
Give us your score, Sean.
Gonna be periodically loading the fire.
Ooh.
You look like a very serious gamer right now.
Definitely.
Why do you think I'm hanging on to him, Oliver? Anyway, continue.
You're right.
But yeah, I would give it an 8. I enjoyed it. It's not something I would normally read, but you know, it's a complete story, actually. Points for that.
And short. I was glad that when I picked it, I found it was like 74 pages. I was like, this is perfect. Okay. Oh, sorry. Where we were at before we had to admit somebody into the group. So close that. I think we're wrapping up the conversation about the art. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to add? No?
I really love the coloring. It was the palette, and
right?
it was just really lovely.
Yeah. Beyond like the whole like nepotism of it all. This kid has a future in coloring.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Give him more work.
He's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've been following Jose Villarrubia on Facebook, and he's been doing like sort of like coloring lessons, and he talks about the shade and value scales of coloring, and then like choosing a palette and choosing colors that work. And like this kid has it on, and he does some really unconventional things. Like, I'm just looking at digital Hoopla 20 out of 78. So that's probably, it's the one where they're in the bar with that dealer that they meet in the hotel.
Probably 16.
So 16 for you. Where it's just, he'll paint over top with a color just as a broad stroke and for no reason.
Yeah.
Or a reason we don't know.
Yeah, but I think it adds to the mood and feel of this book.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
No, and like you can go from scenes like that to like the convention scenes, and it's sort of all of a piece, but still very different, which I appreciate.
Yeah, he's a very good. I mean, it probably helps that his father. He probably has his father in his ear, but yeah.
There's there's those pages like the sort of flashback pages, like
right
42 that are almost monotone, or 41, which would be 45, I guess, for you, Jolie, where they're kind of almost black and white. But there's a really lovely subtle quality to that coloring. Another one that struck me so much that I bookmarked it was at the very end when it's with all the panel with the cop cars and the lights. Like, let's see if I can. It's that one.
Wait.
Is that after he punched the guy in the bathroom?
Oh, that's near the end, right?
Yeah, it's right at the end. And if you
Really
look at
good.
It's 2+67.
It's so impressionistic, like the feeling of light in the air, like it's really beautiful. You look at that, like the coloring on that. Yeah, like look how great the color is on that page.
Yeah, it's incredible.
He has a really great sense of atmosphere. And he also employs that like sort of dry brush stroke to his edges that his father does, and it's like it also adds it makes the symbiosis between the inking and the coloring like amazing.
If you go back one page, Mike,
right here.
Yeah, if you go down, because the final panel, you see that same thing where he's doing that Jolie was talking about in the bar, where he's doing like a broad stroke of blue, and then like and then the red, and then where they cross over is the purple, and so it's obviously like layered, but it's really very loose and energetic. Beautiful.
Right.
Yeah. Watch out, Dave Stewart. Someone's coming for your gig.
Yeah, the atmosphere is totally perfect. Definitely.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about the story a little bit and the characters.
Sure.
Before we jump into that, has anyone read Criminal here?
So I think Lucy said that she tried to read Ed Brubaker before but couldn't get into it, and I wanted to echo that because I had the same experience.
Because it's I was just wondering because I have not read Criminal, but it seems like he's working in that world. But I will just consult Wikipedia later. Back to Mike Fritsch though, because he was about to say something amazing.
So we had like the two main characters, Jacob and Hal. Is Jacob, is he like a B&E guy? Is he like on the wrong side of the law? He doesn't seem like much about himself in the narration, other than the very first page he says that he was working on, what was it? He had a lot of trouble with a house that he was looking at I was out doing footwork on a job that I was having trouble with. And his father was a thief, right?
Right.
Right.
Did Hal pick him because he was a thief?
That's what he said.
Yeah, that was the impression I got.
Yeah.
And he was also his unpaid intern.
They said that his dad was a thief. I don't know if he had been, because it sounded like he had started off working for Hal before he was a thief.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I like the assembling the crew montage where it's just a guy and it's like, all right, here's the plan. We're going to kick in the door and beat him. I was like, that's actually a pretty good plan. You know? It's not overly elaborate, but.
It seems like he started as a comic book artist and then somehow transitioned to
Yeah, the impression I got was that Hal knew that Jacob had connections, and that's what he got him for. He did not know that he was actively a thief at the time because he thought he was still doing comics when they met. So he did not know that he had taken on Dad's job.
But Jacob did say he was doing the same business as his father, who was a
family business.
Family business.
Jolie.
So I wasn't sure if I should include this because I haven't read the other criminal books, but it does look like the Wikipedia page was right. I just assumed that he wasn't, maybe because it didn't tell us his last name in the book. So I didn't know that if the Jacob Kurtz, who's listed in the characters that are important in the criminal sort of world, if this Jacob was the same person, but it says Jacob Kurtz is an expert forger and author of a popular newspaper strip called Frank Kafka Private Eye. He's an acquaintance of Tracy and was once married to Sebastian Hyde's niece. And these are all characters within that sort of sphere of criminal. So I think this Jacob who is listed in the Wikipedia page is the same Jacob that we're reading about, because the last adventure was called Bad Day. And it starred him. And this is called Bad Weekend, which is a novella. So I think it is the same person. And he does have sort of like a shadier past.
It's just funny to me because Bendis just did a comic, which is kind of similar. And like, why do all these comic writers have this noir fantasy of themselves? I just find it amusing. Like,
well,
I want to be a noir person for reals.
But wait, we should mention
everyone, Pat.
It's funny.
We should mention Ed Brubaker is a former drug dealer.
What?
Yeah, he's an actual drug. Yeah,
he's writing from experience.
Ed Brubaker is a criminal. Like, he is an actual criminal.
Wait, but are we talking weed or what kind of drug are we talking
like,
about?
I don't know the exact details, but he did a huge interview in Comics Journal where he talked about like I don't know if he about having a gun and having a gun pulled on him, and he was a certain rank in like a gang or whatever. But yeah, he was a drug dealer.
What was he, like a Tim Allen? He just like
Roll that.
He break bad.
yeah.
Tim
That's
Allen.
crazy.
No. I mean, I think he was like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the exact level, but he was definitely involved with crime of some kind.
Huh. Juicy dirt. Thank you.
Yeah, and usually people of celebrity note have like a personal life section in their Wikipedia page, and conveniently his is excluded. So I can't find anything about this drug dealing, but maybe that's something we can pass around later.
He does have a true story autobiography, Complete Low Life is the title.
Oh, okay.
So if anyone wants to research that later, that's there.
Interesting.
So is this character author insert?
Is there a character that isn't?
I just like the dirtbag old timey like artist. It's like, I didn't really care. I just did it for money and just beating people up in a bathroom with a gun.
I got like more of a sense of the Hal character. Like, do you really feel like the Jacob character was much of a character? Like, is this really his story?
Yeah.
It's definitely Hal's story more than it's Jacob's. That's for certain.
It's from his point of view, but I guess Hal's the protagonist, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I just don't know whether. Right. Like, I don't know whether Jacob is particularly successful as a protagonist. He's sort of there. He's sort of a Nick Carraway character from Great Gatsby, right? Like he's telling the story, but he's not really the main character. And if he is the main character, like, I don't know whether I necessarily feel like what does he want? What is he after? Does he have much character? So
I feel like
No,
this is
but-
like a B-side for him because
Yeah.
it's like a spin-off of this larger sort of criminal thing that some of us may not have read before.
Right. But since we haven't read that and we can only judge by this story itself, like, do you feel satisfied by his character and his character arc?
I was satisfied by his function in the story. Like he does what he needs to do.
Yeah, I think
It
that's
seemed like a lot of work for $100.
Is that all he gave? Is that all they gave him?
Oh, you got a lifetime pass to the Comic-Con.
Well, there's that too. I mean, he can sell that. So I mean,
I think it's also just the length of the story. It's too short to develop them any further.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's how I see it.
just to jump in real quick, there is a GQ interview that he did, and one line from it I'll read here is, "Between that and glamorizing drug addicts, of course, I was immediately like, hey, drugs, let's do those. I got into a lot of bad situations and a lot of trouble, and I can always remember those years in my early 20s when I was just really scraping by. I was kind of a young fuck up, and I didn't really try to get my shit together. I was going to be an artist, and I was hanging out with really bad crowds and doing a lot of small-time crime. Then that got out of hand, and I almost got into some serious trouble and almost went to jail. So I have a lot of memories of that time."
Mm-hmm.
So this is an autobiography?
This story?
Yeah.
Well, I think everything in the story is like I don't want to get into like I don't know if we want, Jolie, if you want to talk about who we think these characters are based on, but all of this is pretty close to reality other than the big heist at the end, right? Everything else is pretty, like, to me, when I see, Hal Crane?
Hal Crane.
Hal Crane. It's like you think Hal Foster, and then I think Alex Toth. Like, to me, this matches the career of Alex Toth and the way, like, I think some of the references at the beginning when he talks about, like, punching out someone, I'm like, oh yeah, Alex
Julie
Toth.
Schwartz.
What's that?
When he punched Julie Schwartz.
Yes.
from National Comics. That was definitely Jules Schwartz.
Oh.
Yeah,
the
like,
name at least. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that actually happened, as far as I know, because some guys like they also mentioned Wally Wood. Some guys like Wally Wood and Alex Toth were so big that they couldn't get pushed around by DC or Marvel, so they would just end up like literally punching people. Jim Steranko dangled someone out a window, I think. And that's why they don't work for those companies anymore, right? Like they didn't last long with the mainstream publishers. So I want to point out quickly, did you guys notice the dig against Image Comics?
Yeah.
That was great. And it's hilarious because this is published by Image Comics. Yeah.
Can you just like recap that for anyone who missed it?
Okay, so there's a page where it's when he's at the convention, and a kid, I think it's when the kid asked him to sign the program.
Right.
And on the cover, it's got, here it is. Let me just share my screen. Share screen. Okay, share.
The Rob Liefeld.
It's 28. It's
right
28.
here. Comic Fest. The Image Revolution is here. And you see this superhero with like spikes and like a mohawk, or whatever. And he's like, "Get me the fuck out!" Here.
A bandolier for his leg.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's like a. Like
It was 1997. Like, of course, that's the character they would have on. Like,
right.
1997.
I think that's a knee bandolier.
But also a complete dig.
It's also sad because, like, you know, like we've met creators who they worked for 20, 30 years, and then once Image hit, they couldn't get work anymore because they drew in like the old style, like the old classic illustration way, and they didn't draw like this, so they couldn't get work anymore. So it's kind of sad.
Well, and also like how many of those artists worked forever and gave up their intellectual property, like like worked for nothing, got nothing, and then here Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane come in, and there's this huge revolution and creator-owned product, et cetera, but like you can imagine how at that moment, like at the end of the 90s, a old school Wally Wood, Milton Caniff type artist is going to be incredibly like disenfranchised by the whole process. Like the greatest artists got nothing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like they toiled hours, like worked harder than anyone, and got nothing. And then you have someone like Rob Liefeld, unable to draw feet
or anything.
But to be fair, though, he may have spent hours on them. So just to be,
to be completely fair, absolutely.
Right? I mean, like that could have taken hours.
I would guess days.
Mm-hmm.
Days, it shows. Anyway, moving on.
So, as far as the story, there's sort of like a superficial narrative at the top, where not superficial, but like one about a convention where Hal Crane is sort of dragging Jacob through his convention experience. Is anyone surprised by anything that they're seeing, or is there anything, Jeff? You were nodding. So
yeah, I was surprised by the ultimate arc. I was expecting what's his name. The moment that the friend came in, I was expecting things to go off the tracks.
Friend.
The other
professional criminal.
The thug.
The B&E guy.
Yeah, what's his name?
Ricky.
The pretty boy.
What was it? Richie?
The thief?
Yeah. And as soon as he came in, I was expecting it was going to become a story about how things went wrong and they try to break in and bad things happen.
Like a Tarantino movie.
Really, what?
Like a Tarantino movie.
I totally expected a Quentin Tarantino movie, and I was actually pleasantly surprised that it pulled back from that. They broke in, and the guy was like, "I don't have it," and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And then the thug goes instead, convinces the guy to go to the banquet and goes with them, and is just like laughing about the whole thing. Like that was, to me, like a surprisingly restrained storyline that went away from my expectations.
But he winds up in the police car anyway.
Yeah, but for like a really minor thing, which I like it wasn't like
jaw.
What?
Compared to breaking and entering, it's minor.
Well, yeah, he broke a guy's
Compared to
jaw.
holding someone hostage at gunpoint, it's minor.
Yeah, like even along a similar line of like the guy who helps him commit the B&E was the idea that like when they introduced the daughter character, when they're looking for Hal's art, the way that they introduce her in the way that like another character is talking about how we gave that to, what is her name, Melissa? Michelle? I think it starts with an M, but like that person has this stuff. You just assume she's like another apprentice who worked under Hal Crane, and then you find out
Lucinda.
Okay, and then when you meet her, you find out that Hal is her dad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and again, this is all happening in the span because the way that they also kind of structure the story is like it's a convention weekend, so it's like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This is all happening within like, you know, a small space of time that like me and you would be spending like shopping or like having drinks with friends. These people are like committing a B&E.
Maybe we're doing it wrong.
Maybe we are conventioning wrong.
Let's
anybody
steal
else
some art signing up.
Were there any other antics that surprised people, like that happened? Yes.
But, yeah, but he's just like hanging out with like, we're gonna sell these, and just like signing them. Like he doesn't care at all about his art. You know, he's like, I hate these characters. Just sign my name, make it worthless.
Yeah, because you see them at different dealer tables and you know that they're counterfeits. But to now see that the actual artist who is involved in creating like the original is another part of that scheme is like crazy. Hello, Carlos.
Sad.
Welcome back.
Is your power back?
Is Carlos here?
It says Mr. Salazar. And defund the police.
It must be Carlos.
Oh. If you can hear us, we can't hear you, but we'll keep going. Okay, sorry.
I did like, it was like, yeah, this is actually a pretty good B&E plan. You know, I thought it was going to get like really elaborate. And, you know, he's like, well, what if he has a safe? You know, you're going to need him there. You know, I was like, this could spiral out real bad. And then it's like the guy's apologizing for stealing from him.
I guess it was pretty true to my experience of conventions. I think the one time I related to what Hal was going through was that same panel with that Image convention flyer. Because like, I get so irritated at that. Like you just see people like walking around, like having artists sign this random shit. Like they didn't even draw that. Why would you ask them to sign it? Anyway.
Right.
Act like a real fan and ask them to sign your boob.
No, I mean like I don't want to gatekeep, but I think at minimum you should at least ask them to sign something they worked on. I mean
Yeah, or like if you're accompanying a child to like maybe their first convention,
or maybe talk about like this is so and so and this is like this is why he's so great and stuff, right?
Yeah, and this is why you should get him to sign the program of the first convention you've ever attended. Like this is why he's important. But none of that happened.
Nope.
My sense of that moment was that neither the kid nor the father knew who he was. But they were signing.
No, they just heard the loudspeaker, right? Like so-and-so is now signing it.
Loudspeaker came on after he left.
Is it after? Okay, all right.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
One thing I think might be kind of interesting to talk about is the way that this book seems to frame the relationship between artists and their fans. Because I feel like this book takes a somewhat negative view of that relationship, where it's potentially very exploitative, and it's something that you can just kind of take advantage of for profit, or just like teach, or just like treat these fans like shit. And I feel like it's kind of taking the standpoint of like, this is maybe like being a fan of certain artists is maybe not like a healthy thing to be.
Well, literally the only fan that he interacts with, he thinks is a prostitute and offers her $100.
Well,
Oh my God,
that,
he was like, he was so surprised, like they would dress like that, like, and not get like, oh, wow.
I'm not just talking about that, but like, I mean, like, there's the relationship between Jacob and Hal. There's also the whole aspect of like these people creating this like these fake, original prints that he signs as part of like a scheme, and it often very much feels like that like fan creator relationship just exists very often as a thing to be exploited or abused.
I would argue that maybe the kid who had a lunchbox, it could be argued that his was not as toxic as perhaps you're suggesting, like his artist, his art versus artist relationship, because he does ask him if he'll be doing sketches, which is something that you generally like sign to somebody and without the intention of reselling. Because at first, admittedly, when I saw like that exchange, I was like, oh, great, this kid's just like Hal, he's like, oh, he's just gonna resell that lunchbox anyway. But then he's like, he was kind of disappointed that he wasn't gonna offer sketches because of his arthritis, which is understandable. So I would argue that that is not so toxic. But then like in our like discussion questions, that brings up the question of like, sure, cool. What do, having been to conventions as fans and con-goers, like what do these people owe to us? What do we owe them? Discuss.
Like,
yeah, I saw that question, Jolie, and I thought it was a really great question.
That was a Patrick question.
Oh,
thank you, Patrick. Yep.
welcome.
Oh, awesome question, Patrick. Yeah. But the thing is that I thought about, especially the links that you put in, how so many artists and writers are getting in trouble, and there's a lot of controversy and all that. To me, it kind of speaks to the idea of we're all human, we all screw up, we all make mistakes. But in this scenario, it's like we idolize certain people, and when they let us down, how do we reconcile that, and how do we come to peace with it? And obviously, here's some good examples of some people who are not dealing with that very well. But I just, artists have always had feet of clay. The interesting thing is that they create things that are greater than themselves. And then people look at that and they think, the artist must be just as good as the art. And it's rarely the case, it's
good point.
Fascinating question, Patrick.
I mean, they're people too. So they're people too, right? So, which sounds like a cliche, but like they're not immune to all the horrible stuff we do, right?
I mean, who among us hasn't cold clocked a guy with the butt of a gun?
Right?
Someone's jaw.
Yeah.
Or sit in the back of a police car.
Yeah.
It's almost to the extreme for me. Like, but also now it makes me think back to all those tables that I visited, of all of the people that we, like me and myself and Michael, would want to interview. And there's always a sign that's like, back in 15 minutes, or like, we're not here yet, or something. And it's like, are they out committing B&Es? Now I'm going to think, are they selling drugs? Are they committing fraud?
Secret lives of comic book artists.
Right? Like I almost don't want to totally like believe that somebody would just just forego all of their obligations, like signings and a panel. But it's like, oh, but maybe if you've been through enough bullshit as Hal Crane has been through, then maybe you would feel like that way. I don't know. Do people have other thoughts about him? Like, is he warranted?
Well, it reminded me of the character from Box Office Poison, where it's like he was also like a bitter.
It's the same character.
I don't think that character was quite as intense or as forgetful as this character.
All right.
You know, I think that's a big part of this character is that he just doesn't remember anything.
I cannot remember very much about Box Office Poison, so I don't know what character you're talking about.
Oh, there was a guy who was drawing for an old school guy who's like there was there's two main guys, and then one of them is becoming a comic book artist, and he is a mentor who eventually like dies as part of it. But yeah, they talk about how he got screwed over in the past from like some characters that he had created, and so you know he was really bitter about it.
It's coming back to me.
Yeah. So it's just yeah. I think this character might be a bit of a trope.
like in this book club specifically, we talk a lot about characters being unlikable and then almost like unlikable to the point where we can barely read the book. But like in this case, do you think that it makes Hal a more interesting character?
I mean, my issue isn't with a character necessarily being unlikable per se. It's more like, do they, even if they're like not a very good person, do they on some level have like a pathos that I can like on some level relate to and sympathize? And I think with Hal Crane, he does. I would say that he does. Even though he is like a piece of shit, like you can see he's also kind of been like fucked over, which like obviously does not excuse his behavior, but it does make it a little more understandable.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's the thing is, I think this is an issue that hasn't really been explored. This whole idea that, I mean, these artists created these pages or these animation cells, and a lot of times, like even there's this horrible story I heard. I don't know if it's true, but a very prominent writer said this, that when Stan Lee died, they found a bunch of, stolen artwork, like in storage in his house or something. Like basically he'd been stealing art from his artist for like years and just keeping it, and like that by law, that's supposed to be the property of the artist that created it. And this has been going on for decades, and it's just one of those things that most of the public doesn't even know about, but this is how the people make their living. They do the art and usually they would sell it, right, to make money off of that. But a lot of times the publishers would just keep it. So wow. I don't know. Yeah. Sad story, but true. I mean, maybe Stan Lee thought that he had some ownership to it because he wrote the stories, but that's usually not how it works. So
that's insane. If you have a link for that, like drop that in the chat.
Okay, I'll try to find it.
Or the discussion, like the nerdy book club thing, because I want to read that.
Sure.
That's the kind of thing that makes me think that the things that Hal is doing and committing like are possible outside in the real world. Mm-hmm. But it's like also there's like the brother of a creator that we sort of know who had also been squirreling away his art, and then and then the brother died and then he died. So where did the art go? Like did anyone find out that he had been sort of hoarding his brother's work? And this is like a very famous artist. Mm-hmm. Like you guys know who this is. We'll tell you all later. But like for the sake of the recording, I'm keeping my mouth shut. But it's kind of intense, the kinds of things that happen. Mm-hmm. So on that note, we kind of like went through Hal.
Can I just say before we read Hal?
Of course.
Yeah, I think to me the sort of the thing that ends up making the story ultimately more interesting than just like sort of like a B&E romp and a sort of metafictional, like ironic convention comic about comics, was that sort of underlining sadness about Hal, that like there was something deeply sad about him, like the fact that he had this daughter. Like I loved that twist, that you thought Lucinda was going to be some thug who was stealing his work, but it's his daughter, and he obviously has no relation to her, and he has all this work that he did, and like, to me, there's a couple places, like the thing that stands out to me was when it's saying for years he was stealing work from other people and selling it, and then it says there was like one like little drop-in line. No one ever talked to him about that. It was like right after he like hit the guy with the gun because he says you were stealing other people's work, and then he said, and Jacob says no one ever talked to him about that because they knew how awful he felt, how much he like hated himself for it. Right? Like, do you remember that line?
Right.
I'm trying to find it.
I'm trying to find it too. But that's anyway, and then so like the fact that you get the sense that Hal and you have that moment when he's drawing the work for Archie King.
Isn't it? I think it's Archie Lewis, right? Isn't
Archie Lewis, and he's like basically taking over for his mentor, and he's like, he probably should have felt bad, but he didn't. He felt so happy, like this was going to be his chance, and he's going to do it. And then when Archie Lewis found out, he ran into a wall, killed himself. And obviously, this is the thing that threw Hal's life. Before that, he was generous, he was happy, he was nice, and after that, clearly he's racked with self-guilt.
Right.
Self-hatred and guilt. And to me, that, and I think it's fairly subtly done. Like, he's a total asshole, but I feel really like there's a sadness underneath of like a life that went off the rails, and there's nothing he can do. Like, he's never gonna, it's not gonna be better.
No. Does it make him more sympathetic to anybody that you know that he is trying so hard to like erase his Star King pages from memory, like from existence, I should say?
I don't really get the impression he's like, I get the impression he's giving lip to it when he's drunk, but he's not actually doing anything about it. He has a lot of guilt, but he's not taking any meaningful action to resolving it or towards making reparations to Archie Lewis's family or Archie's legacy. And he's not trying to do anything to make himself better or to help himself get over it. He just gets really blotto drunk every once in a while and says, "Hey, I did this thing," which I can't give him any credit for getting blotto drunk and doing a thing when he's blotto drunk.
And it's like, it seems like he does this every year. Like, the story felt kind of like, is this Memento, and he just forgets that every year he
does it.
Like,
there is, okay, so like there's a bit from Louis C.K., and I know Louis C.K. is Louis C.K. We all know what he's done. But there was a bit where like it was him and Mark Maron. And he like shows up at Mark Maron's house and he's saying like, "Hey, I know we had this big falling out and I feel terrible about it. And I just really wanted to show up and say I'm sorry." And Mark Maron says, "I know, you showed up here a year ago. You were blackout drunk. You said the exact same thing that you're saying now." And Louis C.K. stops and he says, "Oh yeah, I kind of remember that." Anyway, just immediately made me think of that. I know Louis C.K. is also an enormous piece of shit, but...
Well, I mean, aren't they all problematic?
Yeah.
Like it seems like that is the topic du jour, where it's you bring that up. So I just wanted to. I think we're okay kind of veering away from Hal. Maybe we should talk about Jacob a little more, because his, like, even though he's sort of, his character is kind of thin, he even has like some kind of layers of that are interesting. And I wanted to talk more about like the whole artist, like the art versus artist, but the working relationship kind of thing, or even because even Jacob admits that he's a fan of Hal's, and that's why he admittedly takes the job. So I don't know if anyone, like, I don't have a specific question, but like, how does anyone, are there any glaring feelings that anyone has about Jacob?
I mean, sort of like I was kind of mentioning earlier, I mean, sort of the lens through which I kind of view Jacob's character is that kind of fan-creator, relationship, and, kind of what it says about both of them. And like I mentioned earlier, I think there's an aspect where, Hal is very much, like, very blatantly, taking advantage of Jacob. And, when Jacob worked for Hal treated him like shit, and he was only nice to him, like, once in a while. And now it's years later, and Hal is only calling Jacob because he wants him to break into somebody's house for him. And there's that aspect, but then there's also kind of the flip side where Jacob has also a little bit taken advantage of Hal by, like, stealing this artwork that's clearly very important to him. So I feel like there's this angle of, like, hey, maybe this, like, fan-creator relationship is, like, not healthy. It's kind of toxic. It's, like, a very sort of manipulative kind of relationship. I don't know. That's how I kind of view Jacob, is through that lens.
I know that ending kind of makes me wonder if, like, Jacob is just doing this to sort of watch Hal, like, run through this maze again, and is he, like, deriving some kind of, like, he never admits it, but, like, is there a love layer of, like, sick enjoyment that he's getting from, like, this man, like, running around town, like, where's my art? Where's my art? Knowing full well, like, he knows where it is.
I don't really get the sense ever that Jacob is, like, has any kind of, like, particular schadenfreude towards Hal. I think it's just a case of, like, he's still, like, a fan of Hal's, and even though it's kind of, like, fucked up and weird, he's where he just gets to, like, hang out with Hal for a while, because even though there's this terrible relationship, he's still a fan of him. I don't know. That was just kind of how the vibe that I got from it.
Oh, so I ended, like, 10 years past. Yeah. So maybe he's like, kind of like some curiosity to be like, oh, has he changed? No.
Nope, no, he hasn't.
We lost your microphone, Juniper. We can hear you, but it's coming from a different source. That's not as loud. Yeah.
Can you hear it now?
Yeah,
No.
It's quiet. It's really quiet.
Okay, I'll just yell. The impression I got was that Jacob is holding on to Star King and is planning to either. The impression I got is that he's planning to, once Hal's dead and can no longer be kind of burdened with the curse of Star King being in the public, he's going to sell it and make his money and be okay. Like, taking that mentorship of Hal to a level beyond art and tying it into his thief roots.
I didn't want to expect the worst in anybody, but I was like, well, I didn't even go there. But you know what? You have a point.
I think
the whole book is really cynical to me, and so I have a hard time giving Jacob really any credit of being a good guy here, because there's nothing he does that says that he is, and he ultimately does the Comic Con, so he has a lifetime pass. He doesn't actually he doesn't do anything the Comic Con wants him to. He lets Hal run around rampant and do B&Es. Like, he's not a force for good in any way in this comic. And so I have a hard time imagining that, oh yeah, he's just holding on to these books for, for funsies. I think he has an ulterior motive in holding on to them there.
I'm sorry.
I didn't read it that way at all. I totally saw this as his final, like, he wasn't in this for the, like, this was the counterpoint to the sort of materialistic fandom, that this was actually him. He was told to burn this, and he held on to it because this is like the moment of true genius on the part of Hal, and he's protecting it because Hal wants it burned because it's connected to all the guilt with Archie. And so I think he treasures it. Like, I saw that final moment as like something that he pulls out to treasure, and he says, maybe one day I will burn them.
And I don't disagree, but protecting them to what end, right?
Like, the room that it's in, like, it's, even though he's not a comics artist, he still has a drawing table, and it's lined with books like Hal's study was, and he has these large, like, drawers that you would pull out the originals on. So, like, he's clearly still in love with comics and the art in some fashion. I mean, like, that was the impression that I drew too, is that he's holding on to it, and maybe he'll do something with it once Hal's no longer around. I was like, if I'm going to read something into this, that was my take on his character as well, because it's like, I agree, that was 100% on point. It was like, he's not a good person in any regard. He's just like, oh, yeah, but
yeah, the non-cynical take I have on it is that he's holding on to them in the same way that Hal held on to his weekly strips. But I
exactly.
Wow.
I find that a little, the tinge that switches me off from that is kind of in the last page where I think it's in the last page, maybe it's slightly before, but he's kind of talking about, like, he never quite got his chance. He's a master without a masterpiece, but here it is. And, like, what's going to happen with it? And I think that's what the audience is left with, is answering that question. And I'm taking the general tone of the book as a cynical tone, and that's where it's leading me. And, like, I don't think that there's a wrong interpretation there, but that's definitely, it leads me down a path that's not super hopeful.
Yeah, it's the odd thief who steals stuff just to steal stuff and not, like, ever profit from it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he doesn't say that he actually stole it, though. He says Hal gave it to him while he was drunk. And I was like, is that true? It was like, I don't know.
I feel like it is.
Yeah.
Which brings up something else that I had written down, which is like the idea, of like mentorship and grooming. But do you have one last thing to say about what's happening?
Yeah, just kind of on that theft bit, is that, like, can someone really consent to giving away one of their greatest treasures while they're blotto drunk? And I would say no.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
if you can't remember the next day, you probably couldn't give consent.
If someone is telling you to burn something, I mean, you're right, there's an ethical question there. But if someone is, if a great painter was saying, like, had painted, like, the best painting of her life, and she's saying, destroy this, should you destroy it because that's what she wants you to do? Or should you hold on to it should you save it because you are because the world should know that?
But that seems so presumptuous.
I think you let them make a decision on their own terms when they're sober.
Right.
Maybe, but that's, like, again, like, if that person wants it destroyed, like, is it more important that the art is preserved. Like there's great work, there's great artwork that we treasure now that writers wanted destroyed, and they are among the great masterpieces of literature.
It still bothers me though. Like this just makes me think of like the To Kill a Mockingbird book that came out. Like I hate that book came out. It makes me so mad. I think like I have mixed feelings about problematic artists, but also I think there should be some respect paid to them. And it's like if they did something that they think is trash, I feel like there's something kind of almost shameful about showing it off to everyone when you know that that's not in their best wishes when they were alive. It bothers me a lot. I mean, I know people can do whatever they want when you're dead, but it makes me feel like a voyeur. Like I feel like I'm seeing something I'm not supposed to see when that happens.
Yeah, like Ghost of the Watchmen was super weird. I wouldn't have minded it so much if it had been like presented as this was a rough draft of To Kill a Mockingbird, but to publish it as its own separate work was really disrespectful.
Can I give a counterpoint to that though? There's a guy named George Lucas who doesn't want anyone to see the original version of Star Wars ever again.
That's good. I don't want to see it.
I think he is a crazy person.
Yeah.
Like I love it. I'm all in. Like it reminds me almost of like the German artist, like who would make these Merzbow houses where he would just like put in all this crap in a house that you couldn't even get in it. Like I feel like that's George Lucas with his movies. He just putting all this crap so you can't even access it anymore.
Am I just being crazy? But that seems like that cat's out of the bag, right? Like you can do that now if you wanted to.
Do what?
Like see the original, like it exists.
Well, you can't.
No, you could.
Right?
There's a famous painter, I can't remember who it is, but he would go to parties and sneak into people's houses and correct paintings of his.
That's amazing.
Because he didn't like how they were. So he would be like, I've gotten better, let me fix this over the dinner party.
I love this.
That is so great, actually, and I would love it if someone would come in here and work on a commission or something. That would be so great. But,
I think it's a good argument. I don't think it's quite a black and white issue where I don't think the artist has. I mean, you'd think the artist would have final say, but at the same time, when the art is already out there and people already love it, then why should the artist, like Juniper was saying, go in and fix paintings that already exist? That seems insane to me, But
yeah, it's also to me, and I think it's also like that's a step removed from where we're at talking about Hal, where his work's not in the public domain, yet, right? Like it's not the situation with Lucas, and it's not the situation. It's much more like Lucy's point of Ghost of the Watchmen, where like it's a work the author made, and they don't want it in the public, and now like someone has access to it. What are they going to do with it?
Well, I think that's also like going around and beating people up to like like he knows that it's not in the public, and he's just like letting this other guy beat people up, and he doesn't say anything about it.
But so Jeff, I want to ask Jeff, like, what would be an argument for doing that isn't about like, because it's good for the world in some sort of abstract sense?
Because I mean, I guess, well, like, because I'm just like among the people who wanted their work destroyed is Kafka and James Joyce and Emily Dickinson. And so like it's hard for me to get away from the argument that it's better for the world, like art.
Well, that seems all hindsight now though, right? Like
sure, but that's like I don't know, like if I judge, if there's something that if someone has written something that is and you're like, I think it puts, because what we're imagining is that there's an artist who has created a work that is judged to be amazing by someone. And then there's a second party who is somehow mediating this, and the artist doesn't want that work seen, and someone else has judged it to be a masterpiece and feels like it should be seen. And so that we're talking about that second person like is the the ethical dilemma is, what's more important, the art or the opinion of the artist?
But back to the text though, if I recall correctly, we're talking about like the original art for a strip. I'm assuming the strip has been published, and therefore
No,
it has not been published.
It was the trial, the work he was doing.
Oh, it was trial for that comic.
For Star King
Gotcha.
To take over, yeah.
Yep.
Because we see in the early beginnings of the book that was published under Archie Lewis's name.
Gotcha. But there's also the guilt.
He was an assistant to Archie Lewis. The stuff that he did, the practice stuff he did, never got published, I don't think.
So there's that guilt element too, right?
Huge guilt element. That's the thing is, he says he didn't, this is the best work he ever did, and he didn't feel bad while he was doing it. It was only afterwards, after Archie Lewis kills himself because of it, that he's racked with guilt, and he puts it away, and that's why he wants to have it burned. And it puts that other person in a horrible quandary where you say, do I have to? But if I go back in time and said, and I'm standing there when James Joyce throws Stephen Hero into the fire, am I going to say, oh well, James Joyce, he burned it, or am I going to be like his wife and grab it out of the fire and preserve Portrait of an Artist as a young man? To me, the value of that is fuck the artist.
And I think that Jacob, I think that Jacob is in that same vein saying,
Still disagree.
Of saying fuck the artist, because he says it, he rationalizes it. He rationalizes the non-burning of Hal's work on Star King in the same way that you're defending.
Right, and I think that Ghost at a Watchman in particular is maybe distinct from Hal Crane and Ulysses, where those were very momentary decisions of a very emotional nature, whereas Ghost at a Watchman was a lifelong decision not to publish. And so I think that pulling Ulysses out of the fire, or in this case saying, I'm not going to listen to your drunken rant, I'm not going to fucking burn this just because you got wasted one night and acted completely differently than I knew you for the rest of the time. I think those are very distinct from Lucy's point of Ghost at a Watchman.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's interesting too that you brought up Kafka and Dickinson, because I still, even when I read their works, I have very mixed feelings. I just feel kind of gross in a way, when I'm reading Kafka's diary about how he hates his dad. I feel weird. It's I read it anyway, but then I was like, this feels like something I wasn't supposed to read.
Sure.
I don't know if anybody else has had that feeling when they've read something where it's I just feel like I wasn't supposed to see this, and I feel weird about it. Maybe I just have too much Catholic guilt in the back of my head about stuff like that, and this is a whole other issue. But I don't know. It makes me think of that.
I guess the reason I would tend to say no is getting stuff from artists so much. They're very much there's just certain stuff, regardless of me as a layman would look at it and be like, that is just the most amazing thing ever and I want it. But then they would be like, no, it looks like garbage and I don't want to show that in the public or sell it because for whatever reason,
well, there's
they don't think it's not good. And
too.
I feel like that just has to be respected.
There is the natural inclination for artists to shit all over their own work because they're so close to it that they can see all the flaws, and it's I was in a hurry, I messed up the hair, or the body proportions are really shitty here. I was this one's no good. It's okay, a lot of artists feel that way, but also there are things where they just specifically did that for themselves, a diary, or the poems that she would stash away in a drawer just to get it out, just because there was they just needed something to just get it out of their system. I think that's different than the natural feeling a lot of artists have where I'm not very good, I just need to practice more. I think those are two distinct feelings.
Yeah, N.K. Jemisin and I think their epilogue to the 5th season, the first book of a trilogy where every book won a Hugo Award. In the epilogue to that, they were like, I want to thank their editor, whomever, who like pulled me back from the chasm of despair that basically they say that like all artists that they know go through. And they were like, yeah, my words were like, delete the Dropbox account, close it, get the server, drill a hole in it, put it in the car, bury the car, burn the car, and then put a drop nuclear bomb on it. I never fucking want to see this work again. And I think there's a difference between pulling someone back from that despair of a work and like saying, no, finish it, and encouraging someone through that, and then producing a final piece versus like diaries of an author that were never meant for publishing.
Okay, but again, like if we're talking about this in terms of like why Jacob either didn't or did not, or chose to either not, in this case, destroy this work, like there's a lot of discussion about the like camaraderie and loyalty that happens inside these like comics trusts, as if they're like some kind of brotherhood. I mean, it's in the links that I included, it's talked about in the context of sexual harassment and the protection of all of these people. But in this case, like how much of it is selfishly motivated by Jacob thinking that he could potentially benefit from this in Hal's death, or how much of it is because admittedly he says that Hal trusted him enough to give him these pages, even though he was blind drunk and doesn't remember. Obviously he doesn't remember, but part of Hal trusted him enough, even though we are led to believe, or Jacob leads us to believe, that he was just like a lowly apprentice. There must have been more about that relationship. Does anyone have thoughts about that?
I got the impression that this was not the first person this happened to, and I don't know intertextually where that is, but that was an impression I got reading it.
First person like Hal?
I got the impression Jacob was not the first person that Hal got drunk and showed these works to and told to burn them. I feel like that was explicitly told somewhere, and I have no idea where in the book it was though.
I think they mentioned several times that there's a lot of stories about Hal that you don't talk about publicly. Yeah. Or to Hal or publicly. Also, like, I know it's a brotherhood, but he's like working, he's trying to get experience. He's trying, what is it? Only a fool writes for free. He's basically doing free work for Hal, but it's because he's expecting something out of it. He didn't get a job, so what did he get? Well, he got this artwork, that means something to Jacob. It might not have a monetary value yet, or at least not want to ascribe to it, but it meant something. So he benefited it in that way. But
Are you saying it's kind of like the same impulse as like when you get fired from like a shitty job, so you like steal stuff on your way out?
I think it was not exactly, because he didn't do this in that. This wasn't like he was burning the bridges out as he was leaving, when he was taking it. But it was like, he's being horribly exploited by his boss. He's not getting paid very much. He's not getting a lot of exposure. He's getting shit on all the time. What is he actually getting out of it? Why did he last longer than the other assistants? It's he made his own value out of it, apparently.
What's your final score, Mike?
I think I gave it an 8 or 9, but yeah, I would actually love to see this turn into a movie, because I'd just, obviously I love this world. I love seeing this world explored. So it's an tapped resource for cool stories. So
I can see like a directed by Shane Black movie.
Yeah. Like Nice Guys.
Yeah.
One of the best movies I've seen in years, for sure. But anyway.
Predator.
Okay.
Or Predators or whatever that is. Yeah.
But Nice Guys is a much, I'm assuming, better movie. Anyway, sorry I was 15 minutes late, but other people were later, so it's okay now.
I'm leaving early.
And I'm sorry I have to leave, but I made plans. Sorry, guys. Great seeing you all, and this will be posted in the next few weeks, and that's it.
These plans have
Right.
been set in stone for 2 years. Third Saturday of every month. But anyway,
I
I
know.
digress. I don't want to
7
like.
o'clock.
But
Okay, and now I will fade into the whiteness. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Akira is still his background. Anyway, okay.
I have a quick question about Jacob and Hal.
Sure.
I've been thinking about this as you guys talk about whose life would you rather have?
Like
And
neither.
Jesus Christ. Why do I have to pick
Why?
No. You can't say neither. That's not an option. And there's a reason, there's a method to my madness here. Because if, like,
is this going? I'm sorry, continue. I was going to say.
the reason why I'm thinking about this is, and it has to do with all this other stuff we've been talking about. Like, on Hal, there's this like really deep sadness, like this real failure. He's a drunk. This guilt that eats at him, that has caused him to lose. He has no relationship with his daughter, but he's also like presented as an artist who who sort of reached the pinnacle of his craft, and does have a masterpiece, even if it's not necessarily seen. Whereas Jacob has flown like under the radar. He doesn't have all those problems. Doesn't have this guilt. He isn't real, but he also gave up art and allowed himself to go away from and in exchange, like exchanged art for this what seems to be a really sort of mediocre life. Like now what he's doing, he's a thief. So like his life is less dramatic, it's less awful, but it's also less like majestic, less like he gave up art. So which is better, to live in the middle and not take the risk, or to have the sort of the artistic masterpiece and that work?
Well, I just wanted to kind of jump off of your point and saying how I'm surprised nobody's brought up how much both of these characters are driven by shame and failure. So I feel like there's a lot of parallels between the two of them, and maybe that's why they worked together for so long. Just because of like they're both just kind of shameful failures. It's just one is more on a grander scale, which I think is far worse. Because they're like in the book they're talking about how like everybody knows Hal would steal from people except Hal doesn't know everybody knows. It's like that's horrible. That's like my worst nightmare. It's like everybody knows I'm a fraud but myself. That sounds terrible. So that's
do you around Robin. Sorry, go ahead, Keith.
The guy with the 3 ex-wives and the unacknowledged daughter is not doing so hot.
No.
No matter what, no matter how many lifetime achievement awards he gets,
He's just gonna get one. He's just one. Just one.
Unfortunately, it is not a memento situation.
No.
Would you do that to be a Milton Caniff or a Will Eisner?
Do what?
Will Eisner punch
Do
me.
what?
Would you have this life, this like a life of personal failure, of like emotional failure, in order to, would you trade off that for artistic brilliance?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure I see why this is like a transactional thing. Like you trade in being a functional human being in order to have artistic brilliance.
Wait, Oliver, I'm not saying that like one leads to the other. I'm saying in this book you have two characters who are sort of juxtaposed to each other, and one like is a greater artist but also a greater failure. The other one gave up art but also is leading this like less just a
Quiet life of ennui.
So it's not like one leads to the other, but if you had to choose one or the other, which one is a better life?
Well, okay, so the dude got a lifetime pass to San Diego, already a mark in his favor. He has some pretty sweet original art in his little man cave, mark number 2. And thirdly, I mean, he has this whole universe of stuff we haven't read yet, in which he may be doing really exciting stuff. So, hashtag Team Jacob.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think, I don't know, I feel like Hal, like, despite his accomplishments, like his accomplishments don't seem to really make him particularly happy.
No.
If anything, like, a lot of them just kind of add to his misery.
And he seems extremely self-destructive. Like, okay, he got screwed over, admittedly, but it seems like a lot of his, like, the reason why he's in this toxic cesspit is in no small way, it seems like, to things that he did by himself.
I mean, that's part of the noir charm.
Yes, yes. I don't know about charm, but
Hashtag King Jacob.
that flavor, right?
I agree, Julian. I agree.
Well, I mean, Patrick said it, and I was like, do you know what? I was going to pick Jacob because it doesn't seem like, I mean, obviously he lives like a little bit shadier than most of us, but he's also not in jail, so it means that he's successful.
Good at it,
shady,
right? Mm-hmm.
at least up until this point. So who won? I mean, aside from having to pay for the flights, and I would never fly into California, but yeah, I would. God, that just seems so like materialistic. It would be like, well, I'd do it for a lifetime pass.
I mean, yeah.
Convention in the world, I guess. Like,
For what it's worth, if you're a creator, like Comic-Con has always been like amazing about providing free passes for creators. Like they used to give me free because I made like zines. I sent them my zines and said I'm a creator, and they would give me free passes every year with like friend passes. I got like 4 free passes every year for making zines.
in the 90s?
No, in the 2000s. Like when, like now, up till now, like I can have like I can get like a creator's free pass. So, like as much as that sounds amazing, if he was creating, he would also get a free pass to San Diego.
But he is creating trouble, so no.
He's doing nothing.
Yeah.
He's doing nothing with his talents.
Anyone else want to weigh on who they'd rather be?
I do get the impression that Jacob is breaking some of the cycle of destruction, kind of in the parent to child, mentor to mentee pass down. And I feel like Jacob's kind of, he's still fucked up, don't get me wrong, but I feel like he's breaking some of that cycle, and that, okay, yeah, he's still stealing people's art, and he's still a piece of shit in his own way, but he's not asking his fans to sleep with them for $100. And he's not a raging alcoholic with no relationship with his daughter. Maybe he also has a daughter that we haven't heard about, who knows. But I do feel like Jacob is living a shitty life in a lot of ways, but can go home and fall asleep with some peace, whereas I don't think Hal can.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
I think going out from here, Jacob's going to have a better life because he got that confirmation of his skill from his father figure. So he's probably going to restart his art career selling off that art.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, that is true, because Hal's big hero killed himself in front of Hal rather than, like, support Hal in any way. Whereas Hal's like, well, you're kind of a loser. And, you know, but that's more of a trial by fire thing for Jacob. And then, you know, he's like, I still remember you from like 10 years later. I mean, you know, it was good. That's not why I hired you, but, you know, yeah, no, it is, it's like the inverse. He got the inverse of what Hal got. Like, Hal's got this horrible kickstart to his career, and he's just like trying to like come back from that. Whereas Jacob is like, has now gotten, yeah, maybe you should go back to that. Because comics are about to take off. It's the late 90s. I don't see anything. No doubt.
Yeah, for sure.
I know that I wrote a lot about the recent allegations that are happening in the comics world. I wasn't sure if anyone wanted to discuss that in kind of in the context of the book. Like, as in, to me, I feel like if Jacob was a woman, the mentor-mentee relationship would have been completely different. Like, the dynamics. Like,
would he even hire a woman?
I thought there was another. Well,
I agree with you, Julie. It would have been a very different book.
Yeah, like, I mean, just reading more and more about it, it's like, if, like, and then that's why when someone said, is this book potentially autobiographical? It's like, maybe it is, because he can't really write from a different perspective other than his own, and he seems to know a lot about what's going on. But can you imagine if this was a woman? Because if you look at it today, that woman would have either been touched. Oh yes, Lucy?
That totally reminds me of John I can't say his name, Lucy, and like that whole thing where like that really young girl was a huge fan of his, and then he ended up dating her, and like she would draw on the show eventually, and he just would do that like serially with women. Like there was at least 2 or 3 where he would have these really young women come and work on Ren and Stimpy as artists. It totally reminds me of that.
Yeah, like every single story where there's like harassment allegations, it seems as though there is that relation, like that's where it starts. Like some young artist comes into a house where there seems to be like the daddy at the top who like inevitably sexually harasses them. But like I think maybe one man in the course of my research was fondled in public, but like I don't know. Well, I don't know what I have to say about it, really.
Well, that's the other thing too, is like the shame of it. I feel like it happens, you just don't hear about it. Like the only like similar thing I've heard of is like Mark Maron again. He was talking about how he was propositioned by a professor he really looked up to, and he was like, it didn't go any farther, thank God, but he was like, I could easily see how I could have gotten taken advantage of. Mm-hmm. And I feel like these things are happening, they just don't get talked about.
Yeah.
Because of just the shame. Like, I mean, it took forever for women, like most women don't even talk about it. So I feel like it's even more shame for men. So I feel like it is happening, just nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah. So like on the other side, sorry, was someone saying? No. So on
I was just about to say, wasn't Brendan Fraser, like the reason, like, so I've heard the reason he basically got blacklisted from Hollywood was because there was an executive who sexually harassed him, and he reported him, and so they, like, as retribution, they blackballed him, and that's why he didn't work for like 10 years.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that is true, and yes, but mostly I was talking about the comic books and the comic book.
I'm just saying, like, in a similar kind of situation.
Yeah. So, like, on the other end of that scope, from the mentee's perspective, usually when allegations like this come to light, there is a huge, like, there's huge backlash, and there's like a cancellation of that person. So another question that Patrick brought up, in fact, was what, like, if the things that Hal, like, is what Hal Crane has done or is doing, is that enough for him to, if he was found out, say, like, be erased from, like, as a fan of Hal Crane, if you found out all this bullshit about him, would you purge yourself of everything you own by Hal Crane?
At least I feel like the stuff we saw in the story, while absolutely unpleasant, sort of doesn't rise to the level of some of the things we're hearing about. But I guess to answer your question, like, I just think it's up to each person to decide what that bright line is. Like, on the one hand, Like, if you want to burn and start a Warren Ellis pyre, you know what? More power to you. Like, I don't think I'm going to make the same choice, but I support your choice to do that. Although I would also ask that you respect my choice to not to start the Warren Ellis pyre in my backyard.
There's room.
There is
think it
room,
kind of depends
yes.
on like what the author's work is, right? So like in the case of like Joss Whedon, where like, okay, like maybe he's coming out to be a creep and like a lot of his work was supposed to be like pro-woman or whatever. Like that shines a new light on his previous work. But if Hal's work was like sci-fi soaps, like him being a piece of shit doesn't shine any different light on his sci-fi soaps unless his sci-fi soaps were about like not stealing other people's work and passing it off as your own and selling it, right? Like, so I think like if the author's transgressions reflect on the art in a way, it's a different decision whether or not that art still has the same meaning.
That's exactly what I was gonna say too. Just like it depends. Like I like things that controversial people make, but I can separate the art from the artist. And if I'm not able to, like, if something they've done or it's come to light will just taint their work for me, it's like, oh, they actually meant this. It's like, well, then that's different. Mm-hmm.
But I think there's also certain bright lines for me, like Ethan Van Sciver, for example. Like, I feel dirty looking at that stuff, and I got rid of all of his stuff from him because that's my tolerance limit.
Yeah. Like there's no attempt at growth with that person.
There's not. In
No.
fact, they lean into that like with a maniacal glee. So
Much like another famous turf we're not going to name. J. Rowling. Bitch.
Well, I mean, like, think of Steve Ditko, you know, who created Spider-Man, but then just fully embrace objectivism. I mean, you know, created the Question, which was like a takeoff of an even more gruesome superhero who just kill people. Like, there's no right, there's only right and wrong. But yeah, like somehow the guy who created a superhero for that, with great power comes great responsibility, just later in life, you know, it's like, objectivism is that. And then it's like, do we throw out Spider-Man? Like, we haven't done that yet, so.
But it's kind of different though, right? Because like, I feel like if you're doing a work for hire thing, like by definition, like whatever it is sort of, it's going to blow, you know, it's going to develop more from like that one writer's contribution.
Also, I think like having garbage politics, while it's certainly not good, it's not quite the same thing as like sexually assaulting women.
I just meant like, you know, if you're gonna like take somebody's later work and then like, you know, I don't know. There's lots of terrible people out there. There's all different sides to all of us. You know, it's
I don't know. I feel like my kind of like thoughts on it is like, if there's like a piece of media that I enjoy and it turns out the creator was like kind of a shitty person, like I won't necessarily like throw that out, but like anytime I engage with that media, I'm always going to be reminded of it.
My view on that is try to make sure they don't profit off of it.
Yes, that's a very good point.
I wanted to read Ender's Game, so I bought a used copy of it for a penny off of Amazon. So he didn't get any of that money.
I think like how public they are also matters. Like, I mean, if you just want to read Ayn Rand all day in the comfort of your own home and not tweet about it, like, one, I'll never know, and two, that is a thing you can do, right? Like, sure, why not?
There's also a certain amount that I think it's worth re-examining those works in modern light. Like, for example, I can like look over and there's a copy of Fidel Castro's History Will Absolve Me, which is a fascinating book to read in light of the rest of the unfolding arc of his life. And I think it would be easy to say, wow, he turned into the person that he turned into, and like this book is like false, and the promises he makes in it are exaggerations at best. And it would be easy to toss it aside. But on the other hand, I think it's really informative to take a look at that and examine what argumentation he lays out there and how that led to where he ended up. And so I think that there is a certain dialogue. I think there obviously there's always a dialogue between author and book piece literature. But I think it's up to everyone kind of how we want to engage with this, but I think that there is value in there and like reassessing works. And yeah, I don't know where I'm going.
Well, I mean, like, if we're going to go back to the book, it's like, well, no, let's not go back to the book. Because obviously he wasn't some weird philanderer, like, fiddling girls, though he almost did. And this day and age...
He was going to pay her.
Exactly.
He was.
Could you imagine if... Here's a scenario...
Hal Crane supports sex workers. That's the takeaway from this book.
Exactly. Which actually like paints him in a better light in my eyes. But like
the rate was low even for 1997, but
it was very low.
Yeah, I was like, really, $100? God, even if she was like, maybe that's what she would be getting paid if she was like manning a booth, or sorry, like, you know, a booth babe. But like,
and in California,
I feel like maybe that's what Hal was used to paying in like 1973.
Probably.
He just never updated his rate.
I love that interpretation. Or maybe he just wanted like, you know, like something small. Like maybe he's not gonna be like, you don't have to shit on my chest. This is only
Lucy, that escalated so fast. Like,
or not fast enough.
Ooh.
Oh my God. No, but like, could you imagine if it wasn't 1997, it was the climate of today, that would have been tweeted so fast and he would have been canceled immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like kind of going back to your point, it's like, you know, or the point earlier where it's like, you know, maybe this person is a shitty person, but maybe if we're inspired by their work, you know, and it makes good, like think of how many people have been inspired positively by the art of the deal. But, you know.
Who are these people? Who are they?
Also, Donald Trump didn't write that, so.
That's the other thing.
But yeah, Ender's Game, maybe.
But
Keith, you're making people up. Those people don't exist.
I'm also somewhat skeptical about how many people have had their lives profoundly changed for the better by art of the deal.
Are you trying to tell us that your life has been changed by the art of the deal, Keith?
What?
Keith has a whole bookshelf full of the art of the deal.
Oh my God! So you're the one who bought all those copies.
I really wish there was like in your office at work, there's a bookcase just with copies of the art of the deal.
So anyone who comes in, this book changed my life. Go, just give it to someone.
First, this book changed. Okay, sorry. Okay, so obviously, it's getting on to be about 2 hours. So maybe we could, unless anyone has any final thoughts about the book itself that we didn't cover that they wanted to really quickly.
Yeah. The thing that I thought was like too contrived about the ending was like he hired this guy. Hal hired Jacob because he was like Jacob's dad. Like he remembered 10 years later that Jacob offhandedly supposedly mentioned that his dad was a B&E artist and was hoping that he was still in the family business. So that was like a big coincidence. And then it doesn't even say that Hal or Jacob stole the artwork. It was just that Hal had coincidentally given it to this one guy, Jacob, who he's the same guy who 10 years later, out of all of his assistants, he rehires and brings back into his life. And that's the guy who's had this artwork all along. I was like, that felt really like contrived to me. It was
But
like,
maybe he knew, and he was just trying to shake a confession out of him.
Mm.
Well, he has ways of getting people to talk.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Or maybe he had, Keith, did you find that Hal had had that conversation with anyone else in finding that?
What? Oh, that he had told them that he'd done Starking?
Yeah. Because like maybe he just like actually likes Jacob more than he's letting on, and he got drunk and told him this thing, and then he's like, okay, well I need someone, and like which assistant did I like the most? I like this guy, and it happened to be the same guy because it was actually the assistant that he cared about.
But yeah, I just thought it was just like, I don't know. There's like where he talked about. I don't know. The impression I got was that he was only hiring Jacob because Jacob's father did breaking and entering, and you know, I didn't. I mean, yeah, they say that he stayed on longer than most, which was only 4 months. And that was like 10 years before this. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I kind of bounced back and forth on whether I liked the ending where it's like, Hal gave this to me, got drunk and forgot. That was like, you know, so long ago. And then he just hired me again out of the blue. And, you know, he talks about like how surprised he was that he got the call.
But this part of it too is like, we're only getting a piece of this. Like maybe he had done this with like other assistants, and then he's like, well, who else do I have left? Oh, so-and-so, his dad like broke into houses. Maybe I'll ask him. Like he's kind of a shady character. Mm-hmm. And the other thing too is he wasn't in the comic industry. Like I didn't notice him saying any of his other assistants really made it big. So maybe he was like too ashamed to contact his other assistants, and he was like, well, he's kind of a failure and his dad used to break into houses. Maybe he'd be a good candidate to help me find this. I mean, it was just kind of a last-ditch effort thing.
And the other assistants may not even be willing to be his gopher
that
for
too.
a day. I mean,
that too. He sounded like a total dick.
Right.
It's still a coincidence. It's still like a large plot coincidence that he's looking for this one thing on this one night.
But I feel like this whole thing is such
to
a
help this guy who happens to have it.
But that's such a noir thing to happen, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't get the impression that this was like the only time Hal was looking for this. So I do think Lucy has a point that like maybe this is not the first iteration, and this is the story that gets told because of this coincidence.
I mean, why would
the other stories did not have this coincidence, so they didn't end up getting told.
Yeah, and like, I mean, even in the book, he said he'll tell the same stories over and over again. So it's like, why should this be special? Like, I kind of like the interpretation that he gets drunk and tells all his assistants this dirty secret.
Mm-hmm. I don't think Hal noticed that it was gone until Lucinda stole work from him. And he found out about it from that other guy. Like, I don't think that he actually realized that the work had been gone for 10 years. I thought, because he truly thought that that's what had been, that's what Lucinda took from his house and sold to the rich guy on the third floor.
Or maybe the other assistants burned the other pages. Isn't that crazy?
Do we know how Jacob is connected to the con? Because there was a point when he first gets wrapped in, he clearly knows the head of the con, and she's pulling him in on favor of Hal. So like, I'm not sure, like, is he a co-chair of the con? And so Hal is like, okay, what are the 5 names I have to pick from to be my minder? Oh, this dude used to be my assistant. That bit of history there, I think, would yield a clue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a little good bit of intrigue that isn't really sort of touched on. I don't know what anyone else assumed, but it's like, maybe he volunteered? Like, how else would she be able to, or how else would she think that, like, passes, like, to multiple years forever would be enticing enough? Like, maybe he goes or frequents the conventions enough that she knows him?
He said that he used to know a lot more. And then at some point he asks the question, he says, I haven't followed the trades in a couple of years. But it's like, Well, if this was 10 years ago, then he did have some sort of career previously.
Well, they show him like he used to really like the convention circuit, and like they did a smash cut to the past where he's drawing sketches and everyone's gathering around him watching him draw all the sketches.
That's right.
Right.
And he used to go to the conventions with Richie or whoever his friend was, and so I think, and he was an artist in the field. Like I think it suggests that he was very much part of this world. Like he was an insider.
Definitely. Like he looked like he was like somebody who could draw a crowd and bring money in. So it was kind of like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing. It seems like what used to happen.
So I'm just thinking about what Keith said about how he wasn't like super convinced about the ending. But what would have, has anyone gone so far as to think like what they would have wanted to happen? Keith?
Well, I would have liked it if he was like, I was the one who stole it. But it was like, oh yeah, no, he got drunk and gave it to me one day. And I just really liked it. And I was like, but that's like a really big coincidence. I was like, no, I would have liked it more if like you hired a thief. And by the way, that thief is a thief and he stole from you. I don't know why you didn't see this, you drunk idiot. You know, like something like that. But
okay. That definitely wraps up a lot of like layers that we've been discussing about Jacob. Cool.
All right.
Cool. So I guess we give our final scores and recommendations, if everyone's cool with that. Unless there's any other parts of this book that, wow, it's funny because it's only 74 pages, but we've gone on for 2 hours and the discussion has been amazing. But I guess we can go around and give our final scores.
I liked how there was a hairy guy cosplaying as Wonder Woman, because I've seen that dude.
No, he was in New York. We saw him. He was.
Yeah, we did.
He was there.
That guy's at every convention.
Yes.
Would you give him a 10 out of 10? Yeah. I find there's not a lot of like bare bodies wearing gender bent cosplays anymore, and it's mostly like really fit, like really fit types. It's disappointing.
Cosplaying world is pretty toxic, so that's I think a big part of it. Like they are mean.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so they were even meaner. I see part of a Lolita costume and I'm like, ooh, girl, where is the steampunk? I feel like there's not enough steampunk cosplayers like in this world, and there should be, because even when I started going in the early 2000s, it was all steampunk and no one cosplayed.
Really?
Yeah, like at least to Fan Expo. The first one I went to was like Fan Expo, and like the Lord of the Rings had just dropped and blah, blah, blah. Sorry, we're getting off topic. We can all talk about this later. But
of course.
Who wants to go first? Jeff.
I have to go soon. 8. Liked it. Liked the conversation. I think the conversation was especially good because the organization was good in the question. I give 10 out of 10 to the questions and to Jolie's leading of the conversation.
Thank you. I'll go next to give my score because I also have to credit, sorry, I'm pointing to Patrick because he's beside me on the screen, but he could be anywhere on yours. I have to also credit Patrick, who helped me with a lot of the questions actually. And then I will bump up my score to a 9 out of 10 because there's a lot of things I didn't consider, and especially about the characters that Juniper brought up, and then about the ending, like Keith brought up. So, and mostly based on their displeasure about those things. So it's like 9, 9, 9, not a 10 though. Maybe a 9.5 because the art was really good too. Like I thought about a lot of different things. I will pick Alex because I haven't heard from you in a long time.
I gave it an 8. I will keep it an 8, and the discussion is a 9. I enjoyed that as well. I will go to Patrick.
I guess I'll bump it up to an 8.5. And I would like to give Jolie's moderation a 10. And I think we should use this as a model going forward, whoever's
Agreed.
moderating. So
Yeah, I agree. I thought this, like, having the discussion questions, making it more like a structured regular book club was great.
Patrick, I hear you saying that you want Jolie to lead every discussion.
No, I mean, sure, if she would like. But I just
I think Jolie did a very good job.
using her as a.
I think
as a
Jolie
model.
should do next month's discussion.
I'm sorry, Jolie.
Whose
Oh,
book is
no.
next month, though? Who's throwing me?
It is House of X, Powers of X.
Oh yeah,
Is
that was
next
my book.
month? I
Next
thought it
month.
was Keith's book, isn't it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong list. My mistake. No, wait. Yeah, August 15th. House of X, Powers of X. Eric is the host.
That was me. So we were doing
It's at 79 degrees
oh,
I thought it was Adventure Zone.
yeah, the Adventure Zone.
Yes.
Oh, let me, maybe I'm looking at an old copy.
Well, then my
It
joke
says
is
Adventure Zone on mine.
Anyway, so Mike Fritch, I pick you to give your score next.
I'm going to keep it a 9. I really like, the discussion. I like the artwork. I like the book. I'm going to be reading more of Brubaker. I'm really impressed with how he's able to set a tone and follow through with it. So, and if his other stuff is short like this, I'm going to like it even more. So, and I will pick June per.
I gave it a good, so that I could give it more numbers this time. I'm giving the discussion a solid 9.8. Very great. Thank you, Jolie. I give the book like an 8. I thought it was very well done, but for me personally, I give it like a 4. It was very inside baseball. It felt very like what I've read about, like, say, Charlie Kaufman's Antkind or whoever that author of Harry Potter is. I don't remember their name, but their Silkworm book, where they're just like very like heavily satirical and cynical books on the insides of their own industries. And it didn't give me anything that I liked. It was super well done, but I just didn't really find myself glad that I read it, if that makes sense. So like, I think it's great for people who are really into comics and like Mike, who can be like, oh, this guy is this guy and this girl is this girl, and like that history is great. But to me, it was a little too inside baseball. Oh, I have to pick someone. Can I get Friends?
Yeah.
No, not Oliver. Can I get Friends? Friends can pick you, Oliver, if they want, but I'm just picking Friends here.
Yeah, I gave it a 7, and I don't ever like admitting I'm wrong, so I'm not going to change it. But yeah, like I had the same experience where it was like I could tell they're probably referencing someone, but had no idea who it was. I did like, it's a very lean noir, it seems like it's a genre we don't read a whole lot. For such a short story, they get a lot done. But yeah, there are a couple things that I just didn't make it perfect. So I'll stick with my score. I'll pick Oliver.
How generous of you, Keith. I'm eternally in your debt. So I'm going to stick with my 8. I thought it was a really good book. It's so nice to read a book that has like, is self-contained and has a finite ending. Also, I'm just going to like mention real quick, since we've been talking about like toxicity in the comic book industry, I'll go ahead and post some links in the on the group club page that are from like employees at Vault of Midnight, and kind of they talk about some of like the fucked up stuff that went on there. So if you want to feel bad, read that. But yeah, I thought the book was really good.
Well, speaking of which, I give Comics and More the book list. So if you want to shop somewhere for our future books, Comics and
Go
More.
see Chris Brown. Yep.
Yeah.
Oddly named, named before actual Chris. The other
much better than the other better-known Chris Brown.
Yes. Less problematic, at least.
Mm.
Sorry, who do you pick, Oliver?
Mike, you haven't gone yet, right?
Mike's gone.
Who has not gone yet?
I've not.
Sean.
I will raise it up to an 8. I actually really enjoyed the ending and the twist that Archie tried to kill them both. It was pretty crazy. I give the discussion 5 bags of popcorn. So.
Oh, thanks, Tom.
Really enjoyed it.
And I think Lucy is next. Or did
Me. I think I'm the last one. I finished it while you guys were talking.
Yay!
So I can say with confidence now my score and what I thought. I did think Keith and Juniper brought up good points, which I'm gonna give it an 8. So those two things that they both mentioned, like the ending could have been a little tighter. There was like a little bit too insider, which kind of took away from it. But I mean, it wasn't awful. It was still 8. It was readable, and I got, like, it still was an enjoyable story, even though I couldn't have got everything out of it that I was supposed to, kind of a thing. So I'd give it an 8. It was a fun read. I kind of almost, like, since it was so short, I almost want to read it again, just, like, give it more attention. So, yeah.
Great. Juniper, it looks like that ponytail is coming. That's your ponytail.
I love it. Okay, so that has been our discussion of Bad Weekend by Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips, and Jacob Phillips. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. That's it. I'm just going to...
Bye, everyone.